Thanks, Rawlings.
Insurance is there to protect you against the threat of financial loss caused by everyday events. It removes uncertainty by transferring the unknown consequences of losses from theft, fire, floods, or accidents to an insurance company. The protection gained from paying an insurance company a regular sum of money is called a premium. By collecting premiums from many people, the insurer accumulates a pool from which losses can be paid for. We represent short-term insurance companies in Zimbabwe and are here to help you understand how they can help you with everyday insurance, because you never know. For more information, call us on 0242 708 031 up to 2 or visit our offices at number 4 Josiah Tongogara Avenue, Harare.
Oh, yeah, I love that introduction. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Because You Never Know series. On behalf of Brand Africa, my name is Patrick Cario, and it's a pleasure to be with all our farmers once again, hoping, of course, that we've enjoyed our break. And oh boy, was it well deserved. And it felt really good just to be able to relax for a little bit and collect one's thinking in readiness to tackle business once again. And I say this because it really forms the background of what it is that we are tackling today. The Because You Never Know series is brought to you, as you know, by the Insurance Council of Zimbabwe. And I love that particular advert because it breaks down the value that we propose to offer to all our farmers. So to all those who are regular members, who are members of our group, we say to you, welcome again. And to those who are just joining, we hope that you continue to tune in and listen to the different aspects of agriculture, rather insurance and risk management that we will bringing to you on a regular basis. So without further ado, let's get straight into the subject matter for today. And one of the challenges, it turns out, there was a very interesting program on one of the channels by the United Nations focused on agriculture in Africa. And one of the challenges that they suggested was holding Africa back was the unwillingness on the part of farmers to, not so much, they were eager to learn, was the report, but less willing to let go of past behaviors and past ways of thinking. So the idea of learning is not so much that we cannot learn, but what behaviors and ways of thinking can we let go so that we embrace the new thinking? So much is changing in terms of business and how we approach business that it really is important for all of us involved in business to learn as much as we can in this intensely competitive market so that we remain competitive and viable. And this is why this one is titled Gaining That Vital Edge. You don't need to be 10 times as good as your competitor, but just that marginal edge is enough for you to remain productive and remain competitive. And so today we will be looking at ways that you can improve your cropping and your soil management so that you continue to have that marginal edge that allows you to achieve the highest possible yield every time. So without further ado, let me introduce you very quickly to our panelists, who are Zivanai. Zivanai Gonzo is a technical advisor with ZFC. So we say to you, good morning, Zivanai, and welcome, if you can hear me.
Yes, good morning, Patrick.
Wonderful. Good to have you with us, Zivanai. We also have Clyde Maponga, who is representing Cell Insurance. He's an agronomist with Cell Insurance, and we are delighted to have Clyde with us. Clyde, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Great. So let's go straight to you, Zivanai. You are going to give us some understanding, because everything starts with the soil. The soil is really foundational to all our farmers. So what you do with your soil, how you look after your soil, how you prepare your soil is absolutely critical to the success that you have with the potential yield. So Zivanai, what do you have to tell us in terms of what farmers can do better in terms of preparing the soil wherever they may be?
Thank you, Patrick. Let me share my screen. Right, is my presentation visible?
Confirmed, yes.
Thank you. Once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Without wasting our time, I'll go straight into my presentation. And as an introduction, I would say all farmers, I'm sure you are well versed with the current issues that are affecting our industry, the likes of extreme weather conditions, what they call climate change, high input costs, emerging and re-emerging pests and diseases. For example, your armyworm, your tutor, your diamondback moth, and of late blight. And then we also have disturbances in the, international supply chains, as most of our raw materials are, come from outside our borders. So the disruptions brought about by COVID-19 and disturbances in Eastern Europe. And one other factor is population growth. I'm sure you all know that the census results showed that our population has grown to about 15-point-something million people in Zim. So we need to produce more. And this graph, this figure shows Zimbabwe food crop production compared to national requirements for 2022. And I got this from the second crop and livestock assessment report from the Ministry of Agriculture. From the table, I'm sure you can all agree with me that things are not okay for our country, as what we are producing is not enough to cover our national requirements, whether we are talking of maize, whether we are talking of groundnuts, sugar bean, peas, or even sweet potatoes. So what we need to do, we need to increase yield and quality per unit area. From sources available, we are shown that our national production in terms of maize, we are around 2 tons per hectare in terms of yield per hectare, which is quite low as we compare it with the potential that is in our different seed varieties. So we need to make sure that we are practicing what we call good agronomic practices, the likes of soil analysis. We have to understand our soil. We have to understand nutritional status of our soil, as well as the soil acidity. Then we also need to manage our nutrition well. Then we look at crop protection and then timeliness of operations at the farm. In terms of soil acidity, we need to understand what soil acidity is. And as farmers, we have to bear in mind that the most important resource is our land or our soil, because it is finite and it is inelastic, and it's a primary factor of production and it cannot be moved. So we need to take care of our soil so that it reciprocates. So we need to understand where acidity comes from and what is it. Soil acidity is due to hydrogen ions, the concentration of hydrogen ions in the soil. That is, the higher the concentration, the lower the soil pH, or the higher the acidity. For most crops, a soil pH level of 5.5 to 6.5 is ideal for normal crop growth, with a few exceptions. So what are the causes of soil acidity? You realize that acidification is a natural process that is increased by normal production. In other words, whatever we do at our farms may lead to acidification. For example, use of nitrogenous fertilizers. At almost every farm in our country, there's always use of ammonium nitrate or urea each and every year. So use of nitrogenous fertilizers lead to formation of acid soils. Nitrogen in the ammonium form is readily converted to nitrate and hydrogen ions in the soil. So the nitrate can be taken up by plants. If that fails to happen, it can be leached. And if it is either taken up by plants or leached, hydrogen ions are left behind, increasing soil acidity. So this process is inevitable. We are contributing to formation of acidic soils by use of nitrogenous fertilizers. And we also have to use them because they're important. So this is happening at almost every farm every year. Another cause of soil acidity is the removal of stover. The residues, the whatever you will have, harvested, the residues, you will remove them. We are burning them. We are making hay bales. We are removing your bases, your potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And these bases counteract the development of acidity. After harvest, the yield is taken up out of the field. In some instances, we all remove the stover, and the removal of stover would mean the removal of the mentioned nutrients, which are your bases, potassium, magnesium, calcium. The net effect will be increased acidity, and we are doing this every year at our farm. Another factor is the parent material, which is the type of rock from which soil is developed. Soils that develop from granite material are likely to be more acidic than those developed from other types of rock. And there's information that soils of granite origin cover 46% of Zimbabwe, which means 46% or so of our soils or areas in Zimbabwe have got inherently acidic soil. Another cause of acidity is leaching of bases. I talked about the bases, your calcium, magnesium, your potassium. There is high leaching where we receive a lot of rainfall. Leaching is experienced. Once we experience this leaching, hydrogen ions are left, and acidity increases. So there are a number of factors which cause soil acidity, some of which we do not have control over, some of which are inevitable. So how does acidity affect productivity? Number one, in terms of nutrient availability. In very acidic soils, your major plant nutrients, including your primary nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, as well as your secondary nutrient, sulfur, may be unavailable, or they are only available in insufficient quantities. For example, phosphorus forms insoluble compounds with aluminum and iron. And nutrients may also be positionally less available due to poor root growth in acidic soils. Plants can show deficient symptoms despite adequate fertilizer application. We often have a number of customers complaining that you guys are now producing fertilizer that is not that does not work, or that does not give desired results. Why? Because of acidity. Even if you apply more than enough, you still continue to have deficiency symptoms affecting your crop because of adsorption that takes place due to acidity. And this graph only shows which nutrients are available at what pH ranges. You realize that most of your macronutrients, which is your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium, are mostly available in the ranges of 6 to about 7.5, whereas your trace elements are more available in acidic soils. We are talking of how acidity affects productivity. Number 2, microbial activity. Your primary bacteria and fungi growth and reproduction are reduced in acidic soils. And there are a number of processes which are important where your microbes take part. For example, breakdown of organic matter and nutrient recycling are processes where microbes take part, and these processes are reduced when your soils are acidic. Another important process is biological nitrogen fixation, which happens in legumes, where nodulation is affected. So your leguminous crops such as soybean and sugar bean may not give you desired results regarding nitrogen fixation because the microbes that take part in that process are affected by soil acidity. Another factor is element toxicities. When the soil pH is above 5.5, aluminium remains in a solid combination with other elements and is not harmful to plants. But once your pH level goes below 5.5, that aluminium becomes soluble and enters your plant roots. So toxic levels of aluminium in the soil solution affect root cell division and the ability of roots to elongate, what we call root pruning. So excess aluminium in the soil solution restricts uptake of calcium and magnesium. You have applied your calcium, you have applied your magnesium in the right quantities, but uptake of it, of the nutrients will be affected because of excess aluminium, which would have been released because of acidity. So also toxic levels of manganese interfere with the normal growth process of the above ground plant parts. And this usually results in stunted growth, discoloration, and poor yields. This is root pruning that I talked about. So how do we manage acidity? Correcting soil acidity is the foundation of a good soil fertility program. But how do you know the level of acidity or alkalinity of your soil? We said formation of acidity or acidic soils is inevitable in some instances because we are using nitrogenous fertilizers, which are also important. We need them. So farmers are encouraged to analyze their soils. You cannot guess the pH level of your soil. So proper soil sampling is an important first step in the testing process. Sampling techniques differ, but the ultimate goal is collecting a representative sample in the field. You collect soil samples from fields used for crop production after harvest and before planting the subsequent crop. So now is the time for farmers to collect their soils and bring them so that we analyze and determine the nutritional status of the soil. Fields with significant soil type or crop history or other differences should be divided into separate sample areas. And the important tools that we require are your soil auger, your spade, or your clean bucket and your khaki paper, where you put the soil samples that you bring for us to analyze. So once you are done with your soil sampling, we analyze the soil samples, the results are out, we interpret the results and then make recommendations based on the soil status. So one other important factor there is crop nutrition and how you manage your crop nutrition. So the 4 other principles of nutrient stewardship is a very important tool that we use when it comes to management of crop nutrition, where we are talking of applying the right source of fertilizer, which matches the type of fertilizer to crop needs. You don't just apply a compound D to all crops. Each crop has got different nutritional requirements. Then we look at the right rate, which matches amount of fertilizer to crop needs. Are you applying the right amount of fertilizer, which matches the crop requirements or the crop needs? Number 3, the right time of application. Are you applying the nutrients at the right time? You may apply the right source at the right rate, but miss on the right time of application. Then the last R is the right place of application, the placement of it. Are you applying the nutrients where crops can use them or utilize them? Many farmers fail on this one, especially those that come with their compound fertilizer, mixing it with ammonium nitrate and then apply a stop dressing, what we call Xing. You are failing on this one, even though you're applying the right amount, the right type of fertilizer. Once you do this, you have failed and you won't be able to achieve the potential of your crop varieties. Right source, I talked about it. The right amount, I talked about it. Right time, knowledge on crop growth stages is very important when it comes to right time of application. And right placement keeps nutrients where crops need them. For example, phosphorus is not mobile, so it has to be applied at or before planting. Okay, then the issues are very important in terms of crop production. We are talking of crop protection, which covers all practical aspects of insect, pest, disease, and weed control. And the crops, are exposed to many factors. Could be below ground pests and above ground pests. So plant pests and diseases can wipe out farmers' hard work and cause significant losses to yields and incomes. And appropriate plant protection is critical to creating, better yields. Where we talk about issues to do with integrated pest management, where you're using resistant varieties, you're intercropping, you're using cultural practices, mechanical traps, and what have you. And other important IPM principles, for example, stock destruction in tobacco production, very important, acaricide rotation in cotton destruction dates, paprika destruction dates, and guidelines for the use of synthetic pyrethroids on specific crops. When it comes to use of agrochemicals, we recommend our farmers to read label instructions carefully and correctly, and make sure you're using the correct chemical for the correct pests or situation. That picture shows herbicide phytotoxicity on which where the wrong herbicide was applied. And that picture was taken way back in 2019, where a farmer in Marondera lost about 100 hectares of wheat after applying the wrong herbicide. Then issues to do with timeliness of operation. For example, lime application, offsetting soil acidity is a process. So you need to allow at least 3 months for the action, for the reaction to take place. And moisture is also important. So in terms of lime application, we are saying apply it at least 3 months before you plant in moist soil. And when it comes to land preparation, It has to be done on time to conserve moisture and allow decomposition of organic matter and subsequent, mineralization, especially for farmers who are into tobacco production. Those who plant their first crop in September, we expect the lands to have been prepared way around March, April, thereabouts. And other critical operations, we are saying in terms of planting, you start with long season varieties to leverage on heat units, which is very important. And when it comes to weed control, we are saying pre-emergence herbicides have to be applied soon after planting, a day or two on moist ground. For post-emergence herbicide, we are saying come in early when the weeds are still young and actively growing, and also before they start to compete with the crop. In terms of pest and disease control, we have to be very critical on this one to make sure that we are scouting and applying the different, control measures on time. And when it comes to harvesting, we are saying avoid losses during the harvesting process, and also avoid losses post-harvest. I think because of our time, I'll end here. There's a lot that we can discuss, but I end here for now. Thank you very much.
Great, Zimana. In fact, yeah, your timing is spot on, actually, because it's just about 10:30. So, yeah, it leaves us enough time to explore some of the other areas. And thank you for that overview in terms of how certainly farmers can mitigate some of the things that reduce their yield and those things that concern productivity of the soil, as it were, especially the acidity content. So thank you very much for your contribution. At this point, what we are going to do is bring in Clyde, because Clyde will now bring in the other dimension, which is the kind of cover that is available to mitigate some of these outcomes. So based on what we have heard, Clyde, what would your contribution be?
Hello.
And by the way, farmers, before Clyde comes in, I can hear you now, Clyde. Yep.
All right. Now, confirm.
Yeah, we will follow your session, by the way, for all our farmers with the question and answer session.
Perfect. Perfect. Confirm you can see the presentation?
Yes, confirmed. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Ziona, for the presentation. I think that actually covers part of the content of what I was going to discuss. And once again, thank you so much for the series. I think I've been following, though probably I might have missed, but I think most of the content when it comes to risk management has been covered. But I will try, probably, if there are people also who are following, it will be a recap. But for those who are now just joining in, welcome to this session, and I'll try to dive into the presentation. And I like the topic. It says gaining the edge in the business of crop production. And Ziwana brought some of the dimensions and some of the things that might actually reduce the yield and ultimately profitability. And considering the amount of effort that we are putting, I mean, we as farmers and as the general population, governments in agriculture, because of the projected growth in population, maybe by around 2050 to around 2.3 billion, we have to be profitable. We have to be productive as farmers to get that edge to feed the ever-expanding population. And some of the risks that reduces our capacity to feed the nation and the population at large have been discussed, but I'll try to touch on some of them. And it is our mandate as farmers to make sure that we feed the growing population. So it is actually very important to consider all this advice that we were given. And also the effort that the government is putting in, trying to put in some funding. And I've just noticed through what the nature of our work, we discovered that the missing link is the risk financing models that we do have, and that mainly talks about how we recover after a loss. We are given inputs and then everything goes to the waste. If anything happens, that is actually beyond our control. So as an introduction, I try to touch on what the risk is and the components of the risk. And I think from the screen there, you can see that it says the chance of something harmful or unexpected could happen. That in itself presents a risk. And considering that we cannot predict with actual accuracy the outcome of every decision that we make in farming, it's about making decisions and choices because of the activities that we do. It presents a certain degree of risk in itself. And I'm sure most of us, we are involved in risk management, simple risk management. I think when you lock your door as you're getting out of the house, when you lock your car, that's actually a way of managing risk. When you are driving carefully, that's actually a way of managing risk. But there are certain technical components that I would try to touch on, the difference between a hazard and a risk. And it's one thing that I've noticed that has caused actually problems between the insurance and the farmers. Because of that mistrust between the insurers and the farmers, you find out that the farmer is probably thinking that the insurer won't pay me, and the farmer on the other end is trying to maximize on insurance. So as a hazard, you see that it's just the possibility of causing harm, and then the risk is the probability of that harm actually occurring. So there are things that we can do that increases the possibility of the occurrence of an event that can cause a loss. And there's a probability of that happening. And that is what I touched on when I said we cannot predict the outcome. And there are types of hazards like physical, where we are talking of the material, the structure, and the operation features. And there are moral hazards. It talks to the behavior or our attitude towards the risk. And there's that moral where there's a change in how we behave when we know that probably we have insurance. We say, probably if it so happens, I know I am covered. And I'm sure you can see there, there's a small table, and there's a peril, and then there's a hazard. So you see that most of the perils, like what has been presented on when you talked of the weather changes and their impact to our crops and their ability to cause a loss. And then there's a hazard, how we act and maintenance or probably neglect our crop. So risk management, I think it's an approach that we take sometimes knowingly or unknowingly, but then an integrated approach is one that I'll try to touch on, that involves the strategic choices that we make. And the process, it involves the first and foremost thing is to identify a risk. What is it that is actually going to, that is the probability of causing a loss. Then you assess it, and then you risk plan, you treat what you can, then all that you don't have control over, you transfer it to the insurance company of your choice. And so I'll try to touch on the concept of insurance. It's a risk management tool. I deliberately highlighted the risk management tool. It's also very important to note that it's not the only management tool that we have. Most of them we've heard, and it's not the only one, but it's the most common one. And because of the nature of the assistance that it gives to, that it brings to sustainability of our farming and our risk financing models, you know that it's simply, in simpler terms, we refer it to the transfer of a loss from the one entity to the other. So in this case, we are saying the transfer of a loss from the farmer, in this case, to the insurer. So because I like the fact that the presentation is narrowed down to crop production risks. I'm sure from the previous series we've had the risks in general in agriculture, where we have got several other aspects of risk, but now we are only touching on the production risks. And what are the risks? Because of the changing weather patterns, you cannot predict what is going to happen tomorrow. You might wake up, the whole field there's frost in your winter crop, your winter wheat, your winter barley. You wake up, there's a hailstorm, and we have had the experience of rains throughout the months up until July. We have had rains in almost every month, which is something that we never had before. So that in itself is presents possibility of us having a loss. Those are the risks that are very, very common. We also have fires that we're in the fire season, and when you have your winter wheat, which is very, very flammable, you can lose everything. So the most important aspect of production is the husbandry, of which part of it has been touched on, how we do it, the planting time, harvesting, rotations, and all that. So the infrastructure that is there, the expertise, the knowledge that I think is the most important the aspect that we need to look at. Do we have the knowledge to know how to apply the chemicals? What herbicide should I apply? So there are so many proxies for losses that we do have, and sometimes you see at the soil quality, the temperature, the crop variety, the planting period, and the planting methods as well, of all the farming practices and inputs, they can result to a loss. And because what we want is to maximize and to get that edge and the crop yield and the quality, is to make sure that we have everything under control. We try to minimize the impact of any thing to happen to us as farmers. So we need to protect our investment, because agriculture really it's a business. So there's so much investment that is coming in, and we have to protect it so that we grow our business. So these are some of the you look at the location, you see that a variety is suitable for a particular location. We have short season and long seasons because of the differences in natural regions. And we also have the variety and seed selection. What am I going to grow? In itself, it helps in managing the risk. When you try to grow a long season variety in a natural region 4, it's a hazard in itself, because it increases the chance of you losing as a farmer. The time of planting, the plant population, all these that we normally term the good agronomic practices. So like Zimbabwe presented, weed and pest management, fire prevention. Now we're talking of the risk of fire, like I pointed out earlier on, and the harvesting and post-harvesting processes. All this, it minimizes the loss. And what is important, I think, on risk management is record keeping. We have to make sure that as farmers, we keep our records. That helps us keep track of what's happening in all the activities at our farms. And it will help in decision making and also managing risks. For example, I would say, if you apply a herbicide in a particular field, you have to make sure that you record it, so that probably the coming season you want to plant another crop, that herbicide has a residual effect that is going to impact on your crop. So that is also very key. And I'll try to touch on the insurance concept, and probably to try and associate some of the losses that we have had to the type of risks. Don't worry about the terms, the covariate risks and the idiosyncratic risks. It simply means that the covariate risks, they affect the community as a whole, and the individual risks, they are limited. They normally affect a household. So I've tried to put on examples there that if one particular ward or community is hit by a drought, it's not an individual case, it's for everyone. But if theft, say you are sleeping there, someone comes through and harvests your maize, it can only be you that can be affected, but there rarely do we have cases of that happening to everyone. And such incidents can also be fire, because it's localized where the source it starts. Normally, it's where we have most of the impact. So all the risks that I've touched on, and I'll try to point out to the covers available in the market. We have cover against hail, because we also have windstorms, flooding, frost, drought, degradation due to early or late rains. It used to be early rains in the case of wheat and barley, where we have an early arrival of the rain, say in September, October, when the crop is now ready to harvest and it starts to germinate. So that can be covered as well. And then we now have late rains in the case of summer cropping. I think we have had it this season when we received the rains later in May and June. So most of farmers were affected that they could not harvest the crop, and they lost part of their crop. And it also impacted on their timing of planting for the winter cropping, because they faced some delays in planting. So some of the risks that we also cover, like the sprayed chemicals from a nearby farm, and sometimes they can be blown off by a wind and it starts affecting your crop. That can also be covered as well, but of course it's subject to a cover limit. If your insurer says maybe they can cover up to 60%, it's that extension that they also cover to try and make sure that we cushion the farmers against such losses. And stray animals, you find out sometimes that you wake up to one day and there are some animals footprints in your fields, and then you'd have lost something there. And also in that cover, we do have transit risks. These ones are limited to fire, overturning, and collision, and theft by hijacking. So it's all this under one insurance cover. You see that it's from the field. You have cover for that, and then same cover takes you to your delivery. In the cases of grains, mostly we are talking about when you harvest your maize, and then the truck faces some challenges on its way, you lose it. We should also we also cover that. And in cases of tobacco, we do have separate covers. Normally the hail and wind as the field cover, and the transit risks, normally the field to flow, which covers losses after the crop has been taken out of the field on its way to the flows. So we normally have three types of covers. That is input cost based insurance. Normally it's applied to drought, excessive rainfall, and in cases of tobacco, on hail and wind. We are covering the farmer, we are cushioning the farmer against failure to recover what you have put into the field. That is your fertilizer, your chemicals, and all that you'd have invested. So in this one is just the minimum that makes you be able to get at least what you'd have put in. But sometimes, of course, there would be a loss of time and all the effort that you'd have put in. So we also have now an option for you to cover against against these periods, but on a yield basis. Now, in this case, we are looking at loss to the potential yield caused by covered periods. In the case of a windstorm, you would have lost your crop there. I'll give, for example, since we are doing our preparations for summer cropping, I would put, for example, maize. you'd have lost your maize and probably you're targeting 6 tons and you're only able to get 4 tons. Your insurance should cover the balance that that's the 2 tons. Of course, less there are some applicable excesses. And normally the value there is the hectares that you'd have planted multiplied by the term average. It's the term there is deliberate so that we don't fix it to be upon every insurer. Some would say long-term average, say 5 years, some would say 3 years, to see if you're able to get to that yield that you are saying, cover me for this, then times multiplied by the price per ton, then we get the sum insured or the value of the crop on a yield basis. Then one of the most talked about covers is the index insurance, where we have area yield or weather index. And I'm sure a lot of work is happening in the development. I think in the country still in the development stage, but I got the opportunity and to work as a weather index insurance officer here in Zimbabwe when we're working with farmers is the way of trying to foster financial inclusion. Because most of these traditional insurance, it has always been argued that it's for the commercial farmers, but we have to bring inclusivity, and we make sure that we make sure every farmer is also catered for as far as risk is concerned, because they affect everyone. So that one is a bit technical, but the basis there normally covers a weather peril. One that is a proxy for loss, that is the say drought. If your yield is directly related to the loss due to drought, that is lack of moisture that is enough to sustain the crop. Normally, in small-scale farming where you don't have capacity to irrigate, this is the cover that works. And normally it works with aggregated farmers. That's the challenge it has, because you would want probably as an insurer for administrative purposes to have 500 or so farmers that are working as a scheme, so that it makes economic sense both at the insurer side and at the farmer side. Then period of insurance, this varies, but normally there are cut-off dates for most covers for beet or tobacco, because now you have your planting period and your harvest cut-off dates and your delivery cut-off dates. So it differs with the time of planting and when the date the cover was accepted by your preferred insurer. And the field cover ends when you harvest or when the final adjustment, in the case where there is a loss, is done. So I'll move on to the issue of premiums.
If I can just come in there quickly. Just to remind you, so we've got 10 minutes and we just want to make room for question and answer before the close.
Thank you. I think I need a minute or two. I think
that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
All right. So premiums, that's the most interesting subject that most people want to know. How expensive is it to buy insurance? And for most food crops, these are just ranges that you're likely to get. And it's normally a percentage of the value of the crop. And I've touched on the most crops that we grow in the country. We have plantations, horticulture, tobacco, and some more food crops, and these multi-peril covers that I was mainly putting emphasis on. I think when I did the presentation, we have drought and index. Mainly there it covers drought. Then these are the exclusions, what your insurance doesn't cover. I think it differs with the circumstance, it differs with the crop, but basically this is what it has. For field to flow, when the crop is in storage at your farm, normally it's not covered. It's covered when it's now in transit to the deliveries. But then we also have all these other exclusions, and this is about Gold Agri Sure powered by insurance, Cell Insurance. We cover everything. I say everything as far as agriculture is concerned, from crops, livestock, farm property, even personal insurance, which we have had. in the previous series. And that brings us to the end of our my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clyde. Thank you very much for your presentation. In fact, thank you both, gentlemen, because what you have done is you have outlined many risks. But the good news for our farmers is that even though the risks may be many, there are also many solutions. So thank you, Zivanai Gonzo, and thank you, Clyde Maponga. For most of our regular listeners, you'll know that Brand Africa presents this program in collaboration with our partners, AgriMedia. And from AgriMedia, we have our the managing director, Rawlings Coffee. So Rawlings, I say to you, good morning, sir, and welcome. Are you ready with our question and answer session?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, Patrick. Thanks very much for the presentations, Zivanai and also Clyde. Thanks. Sure, we have a number of questions that we have received from our farmers and some comments as well. I'll go straight into it. The first one is from Mbauya. Mbauya says, thanks so much for the webinar. Where can I get my soil tested? I think it's directed to Zivanai.
Sorry, what's the question?
Okay, they're asking where they can get their soils tested.
They can bring them to ZFC. We had 35 Coventry in Workington.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that one. Then another one is from Moyo. Moyo says, thanks for the very informative presentations. My question is directed to Clyde. That in the event of a loss from application of a herbicide instead of a pesticide, as Zivanai said earlier on, an incident referred by Zivanai earlier on, can this be covered by insurance?
All right, thank you so much for that question. I'll try to answer it with the example that I've given during my presentation. Normally, when we talk of insurance, we're just normally covering what is not within your control so that we bring everyone on board as far as the risk management is concerned. So you find that when I presented on the expertise and when Zivanai said reading of instructions and directions of use for these chemicals, it's mainly a control that we have within our capacity as farmers. Normally it's not covered by insurance, but activities of another person on nearby farms probably affecting you as far as chemicals is concerned is what we normally cover, so that we encourage good risk management process, and also to make sure that we keep our insurance prices at minimum levels that are affordable to everyone.
Okay, thanks for taking that one. Dare says, how can we get in touch with Soil Insurance?
Thank you so much. We can. I think I shared the contact details on the last slide of our presentation. But we also have our Facebook media page and LinkedIn, Twitter, and our offices are Corner 2nd in Kwame. That's where the head office is in Harare, close to the Parliament building there in town. Visit us. Thank you so much.
Okay. Then we have Mr. Macheka, this is for Zivanai. He says, can I apply lime without testing the soil? What are the dangers?
We don't advise that, because you need to know how much lime to apply based on the soil analysis results. And you may end up applying lime when in actual fact, we don't need to apply it. So it's best for them to bring their soils for analysis. We analyze and then offer remedial action if need be.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Then Mrs. Zirewa says, thanks Takutzwa for elaborating on the importance of farm business records. It's an area that we normally overlook as farmers. Okay, thank you, Mr. Zirewa, for that comment. Then Tafara says, what is the difference between lime and gypsum? think this one is for Zivanai.
Difference between lime and gypsum.
Yes, correct.
I'll start with lime. Agri-lime is what we use to offset the acidity in our soils. And there are two types. We have dolomitic lime and calcitic lime. Lime contains calcium and magnesium as your bases. Calcitic lime contains about 95% of calcium carbonate, and dolomitic lime contains about 52% calcium carbonate and around 40% magnesium carbonate. And it is the carbonate component that is important for offsetting the acidity, whereas your gypsum contains calcium and sulfur. It does not contain the carbonate component. So gypsum is mainly supplying calcium and sulfur to our soils. It does not do anything on soil pH, whereas lime offsets the acidity, and over and above offsetting the acidity, it also supplies your bases, calcium and magnesium, in different proportions depending on whether you are applying dolomitic lime or calcitic lime.
All right, thank you. The next question is from Munyaradzi. Munyaradzi says, thanks Zivanai and Clyde and ICZ for this informative event. My question is, in the case of multiple crops on the same farm, say I have maize, I have tobacco and soybean, do I insure these at once or individually?
Hello, yes, confirm you can hear me?
Yes, sure. We can hear you clearly.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that question. Normally, because of the nature of the crops and the differences in values and the risks that affect those crops, we encourage to get cover on a specific crop. Normally, you find that for tobacco, it's normally hail and wind and field to flow. And then for maize, it's multi-peril and all those periods that we talked about. So a blanket cover it's not a one size fits all. So each crop has got a tailor-made specific product or insurance cover for it. But we also have a farm comprehensive insurance that takes into account everything at the farm, where you're looking at all those crops, but issuing of covers, targeting crops that are different, you get cover for that specific crop.
All right, thanks for taking that one. Then another one is from Tawanda, who says, do you cover losses from fire? I once lost my maize crop due to veiled fire some 2 years back, and unfortunately I was not insured.
Thanks so much, and it's quite unfortunate, but the good news is that we do have cover for you. I think it's also one of the periods that I pointed out earlier on to say we are now in the fire season, and we do have fire cover for all your insurance needs at the farm, be it your property, your crops, mainly before you harvest infield. And sometimes you can take a storage policy where you cover against fire for crop that is within the farm storage before it's delivered to the GMB. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. I think that was the last question because of our time. Over to you, Patrick.
Well, thanks very much, Rawlings. It's good to have your contribution and your oversight as usual. And to both our panelists, Zivanai Gonzo, representing as he did ZFC Limited, and also Clyde Maponga, representing Cell Insurance. We really appreciate the fact that you took time to prepare and deliver as expertly as you did. And to all our farmers, we appreciate your participation as well, because without your participation, information, really, what is the point? And Rawlings, you make a good point. I think one of your listeners made a point of acknowledging the fact that record keeping is important for all businesses, actually, because we're in the business of making decisions. And how do you make decisions if you cannot reflect on that which you have done? So that was a good point on which to end. So on behalf of our sponsors, the Insurance Council of Zimbabwe, and also the ones who enable this platform, Brand Africa, and indeed our partners, AgriMedia, to you, Rawlings, we say good morning to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you again very, very soon. Good morning again.